Hello and welcome back to part 2 of the sunflower import into the Manchester map, the additional fruit type that we're going to be adding into the Manchester map. At the end of the last video I said we were then going to go into Giants Editor, which we will do very shortly here, but what I want to do first of all is just show you the actual particle animations and fill planes. Now again, luckily I chose Paradise Valley, the Paradise Valley map, for a specific reason, because it does actually have those particle animations and fill planes and all the other bits and pieces that we've already used in that particular map, so that's really good for us. So what I want to do here is just show you how to bring those over into the map as well, because if we were to just go into the game itself now and then harvest sunflowers, and those that have already played on Manchester and harvested soybeans will already know this, the actual particle animations and fill planes don't show up correctly. There are soybean particle animations and fill planes available, but this particular map doesn't have, or the Paradise Valley map doesn't have that, so I can't show you that, but it's all very much the same. If you can find them somewhere on another map, then this is how you would go about putting them in. So what I want to do here is create a new folder within my Manchester map here, and I'm going to call it the same as what it is on the Paradise Valley map, just multi-fruit. So what I'm going to do here is just highlight that and copy it, come over into my Manchester map. I'm going to create a new folder and then paste that in, so it keeps it the same as what it is on the Paradise Valley map. It doesn't matter, you could call it whatever you want, but we'll keep it the same for now, just to keep the structure somewhat similar. So I'm going to open up that particular folder on Manchester, open the map in Paradise Valley, and I'm just going to select the fill plane and particle animation for the sunflower, and then I'm going to drag that over and copy it into Manchester. So now that I've got that into there, I can close down the Paradise Valley map, and we will now actually go into Giants Editor, and I will then show you how to complete this, hopefully, within Giants Editor before we get into game. So I'm going to open up Giants Editor. It can take a little while, so I'm going to pause the video here, and once we're in, I'll then come back, so see you in a little bit. Okay, so we are now in Giants Editor on the Manchester map. Just going to close that down a little bit, give us a bit more retail to look at here on the screen. Okay, so now that we're in the map itself within Giants Editor, I'm going to actually have a look at field 1, specifically because at the start of a new game save you do not start with field 1 as an owned field. It's not one you actually start with. I believe all of the other fields have actually got something in them anyway. And one thing I will point out to anyone who is attempting to do this, for me at least, I would say it's highly recommended that when you add in any additional fruit types, and I may have already mentioned this, I can't remember, but I'm going to mention it again anyway, even if I have or haven't, whichever way. When you do this, I would highly recommend that you start a new game save. There are ways around it to do with GRLE swaps and things like that, but I would say it's best to start a new game save just to prevent any further errors occurring down the line. If you were to continue on in an old game save, it may work to start off with, but I think later on, as you progress through a game save, especially if you intend to stay in that game save for some time, you may find that errors will occur that didn't show up earlier on, but may then occur later on with texture errors and things like that. So I would say in every case I have done this, it has always been beneficial to start a new game save, start from scratch, and I think you'll find that a better option. But I'll leave that entirely on you to decide which way you choose to go. So let's get into this now, and what I'm going to do here is, as I say, I'm going to work with field 1. I do not believe you actually own this field at the beginning, so if you wanted to get straight into whatever additional fruit type you were adding, again in this case sunflowers, you may wish to override one of the other textures, perhaps maybe in a field that you do start with. Again, entirely up to you. I'll leave that on you to decide what you want to do there. So I'm going to just, as I say, go with field 1 here, and I'm going to put down some sunflowers. With any luck they will work. Sure they will. Confidence. Have faith, is what they say. Anyway, so let's start by going into our actual window here. So we need to go up to the taskbar at the top here, click on Window and open up Terrain Editing. And then if I scroll down to my foliage layer painting section, these are all the foliage layers that you can actually apply to the entire map, whether it be grass, pink flowers, blue flowers, bushes, whatever else. Again, in this particular case it's sunflowers, so I'm just going to look in the foliage layer list here and look for sunflower, and luckily it is there. So far that would indicate the parts that we did within editing the Mapeye 3D and all the other parts has worked thus far. So now what I need to do is actually select the correct foliage channels to apply my sunflowers to the field that I wish to put them in. So the way that I do that is to manipulate foliage channels 4 to 7 to give me the correct growth stages and their appropriate textures. Now, starting with foliage channel 4, this will be just after you've seeded, so no actual growth stage will be shown on screen, so we don't need to worry about that one. And then we go over to 5, which will be our first actual growth stage on screen. So if I go up to my terrain foliage paint mode here, and I will actually lower my brush size down a little bit too small, bring it up, there we go, like so. And as I say, with foliage channel 5 selected, we can paint down our first actual growth stage that we will see on screen, like so. Then if I go to 4 and 5, I will get my second growth stage, like so. Then I can go to 6 and have our third growth stage. Then 5 and 6 for our fourth. This will be the first actual harvestable growth stage in game. And then we can go 4, 5 and 6 and get our fifth growth stage and the second harvestable growth stage in game. This then will lead on to 7, which will be our actual withered, where we will no longer be able to harvest the actual crop itself, again in this case sunflowers. Then once we've actually got up to our 4th and 5th growth stage and we do actually harvest the particular crop, what we will end up with is channels 4 and 7, which will be cut short, like so. Okay, so we've actually been able to show there that all of the growth stages do show up within Giants Editor, so there's a good chance they will show up in game. So what I'm going to do here is just put down a particular area of sunflowers in their first harvestable growth stage. What I'm going to do here is just switch over to my square brush, just because I find it somewhat easier to put down, especially when you're dealing with square fields or straight edge fields. If you have a map that has multi-angle terrain and things like that, it may be somewhat different, but this particular map doesn't, so it works really, really well. So I'm just going to paint down some sunflowers here, and I can scroll out and make my brush a bit bigger just to give me a larger area to cover with our sunflowers. Okay, so now that I've done that, I've put down enough I think there just to give us an idea that it does actually work and we can harvest the actual crop itself. We can move on from there, and we will come back to this once we actually get into game. The next thing I need to do is actually look at the tip triggers for our storage and also for our sell points. So what I want to do here is I'm just going to use the main farm here and make some changes to the tip trigger here for our storage area. Now luckily on this particular map it is just a encased grain dryer. On some maps you will actually have to perhaps import heaps like you have with your, on this map, your grass, forage, chaff and so on, and then apply the appropriate textures and whatever else. but luckily on this particular map that's not required. So all we can do, or all we have to do here, is just make some changes to the actual tip trigger itself to accept our new additional fruit type, again in this case sunflowers. So I'm just going to click on that particular trigger there, and you can see that come up. Now at the moment I haven't got anything open that will allow me to make any changes, so I'm going to close down my terrain editing window, go back up to my taskbar, click on window, and I'm going to open up the user attributes window like so. And you can see immediately then in there we have our fruit types and the appropriate parts that make everything work. So the only thing I need to have a look at here really is the actual fruit types themselves and the price multiplier that will be required for this particular trigger. The way that that trigger is set up, it will require a price multiplier, but the price multiplier for all of the fruit types in there is going to be the same, just 1.0. It's just the way that particular tip trigger works. So I'm going to go ahead and add my sunflower additional fruit type into there like so. And if I come down to price multipliers, I just need to, as I say, put in that multiplier of 1.0. Now that we've got that into there, that tip trigger will actually accept sunflowers. Okay, so the next thing I want to do here is I want to be able to actually get my sunflowers back out of this particular grain dryer. And the way that I do that is to come over to the spout here, and I'm just going to click on the actual main, it says there overhead bin, but the actual main silo part itself. And if I scroll down, we have our silo triggers. Now you will need to look at the appropriate one, because obviously there are three, because on this particular map there are 3 different storage places. You have one here, one at additional farm over there, and another one at additional farm over there. So when you're actually doing this, depending on how you wish to work this, you may want to have it set up so that only one particular grain dryer or one particular area can accept the additional fruit types, or you may wish to change the others to accept the additional fruit type as well. Entirely up to you. I'll leave that on you to decide how you want to do that for your particular roleplay or particular farm setup. So I'm just going to apply the changes to these, and then you can apply the same changes to the others if you so wish. So now that we've actually highlighted the appropriate silo trigger here, I need to add in that fruit type again, similar to the tip trigger, but this is obviously going to be where we get our grain back out of the silo from. But it's just a case of applying that to the fill types there. So I'm just going to add in my sunflower like so. Now I will actually be able to get sunflowers back out of this silo here. Okay, so now that I've made that particular change, and I can now tip in my sunflowers into this particular silo, and I can then get them back out again. All of that is now done. So I can now move over to my cell trigger, and I'm going to just go over to the co-op here, and you've got the tip point at the back of the building here. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on that particular tip trigger. Now, unlike the other one that we already adjusted, this is a cell trigger, so certain things will need to be different. The actual fruit type is going to be the same. In this particular case, again, sunflower, but the price multiplier, where we had 1.0 at the other one, which was just for storage, we need to apply a price multiplier that will give us the actual return price on what we sell here. So this will be up to you to come back in and change this and adapt it to whatever you feel is comfortable, whatever price you feel is going to be acceptable for the sale of sunflowers. So I'm just going to put in a price multiplier of, I don't know, maybe, let's see, 2.2. Let's go with that, shall we? And like I say, you will need to play around with that a little bit to get the appropriate price that you feel is comfortable for you on the sale of sunflowers. Okay, so now that I've done that and I've made the changes there, we're pretty much done with all that. As I say, you can adjust the other triggers to suit what you wish to do. I mean, for cell triggers, for example, we've put a price multiplier in there of 2.2. For your other cell triggers, you could adjust that to a different value so that each particular cell trigger gives you a different price for the sale of your sunflowers. And then when you come into your great demands, what was once a cell area or a cell trigger that didn't give you a great value suddenly may come into its own and then give you a good return. So it can all play into the game itself and the role play of Farming Simulator 15. And I will leave that up to you to decide how you wish to do that. This is just to show you how to get sunflowers into the game and set up the appropriate triggers. The other additional triggers will be on you to have a play around with and sort out depending on how you wish to play the game. Okay, so now that we've got all that into there and we've set up that part of it, the next thing I want to show you is the actual particle animations and fill planes for sunflowers. Now, as I said already, we've taken these from the Paradise Valley map. There are others around by on different particular maps. You will need to have a look around and find those yourself, but the actual implementation of them into the map itself is going to be exactly the same in my experience. So what I want to do here is add in those particular, as I say, fill planes and particle animations, and the way that I do that is I'm going to go to my file on my taskbar here, and then I'm going to go into import. And what I need to do here is find the Manchester map, and I'm just going to go back to my desktop here so that I'm actually choosing the correct one. And then what I need to do is go into my map folder and our newly created multi-fruit folder where we put in our fill plane and particle animation for sunflower. Doesn't matter which way you add these in, there's no particular order. So we'll just start with fill plane, and all I'm going to do here is just double click on the i3D and import that into the map. I would recommend that you do not move it from where it is imported because it will break it. It is buried somewhere under the map with all of your animated animals and all the other bits and pieces, and if you were to move it from there, chances are it would probably break it. So I would leave it where it is under the map. Now that you've imported it, just leave it alone and click away from it in the Cinegraph. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is go back into my import here, and I'm going to go back to my multi-fruit folder and then bring in the particle animation. So again, we open up that folder and double click on the i3D. This will then bring that into the map as well, and we will then get what we require for sunflowers, as in, I say, particle animations. So the correct animations will be shown for our fill plane when we fill up our harvester, trailer or whatever else, and the particle animations coming from the fill spouts on both the silos and also the empty spout or empty pipe or whatever on the harvester, and from the back of the trailer that you're tipping your sunflowers from, and all the rest of it will show up correctly, and we'll have a look at that once we get into game and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so now that we've got all that set up, we've put down our sunflowers in an area that we can harvest them, set up our tip trigger for our storage, we've set up our tip trigger for our cell of the sunflowers themselves. We've added in the particle animations and fill planes for our sunflowers so they will show up correctly within our appropriate equipment, hopefully. You can find certain modded harvesters, trailers and things like that that have their own particle animations and fill planes built into them, but by doing this it actually applies that to the entire map itself, so you can use any in-game equipment and get the same effect. You will get your particle animations and fill planes just using any equipment whatsoever, whereas with edited or modified equipment it will only work for that said equipment and not for any other. By doing it this way you can get it for any equipment you happen to use. I will say that as there may be a possible conflict by doing it this way. If you do choose to use a modified trailer or harvester or something like that that does have its own fill plane and particle animation, by adding them into the map like so, you may find that it will cause a conflict because it may not know which one to display. In my experience it's not caused too much of a problem, but I generally tend to stick with stuff that doesn't have any of its own particle animations and whatever else anyway. So, you know, again, that'll be on you to experiment with and see how you get on. Okay, so we're done with the actual Giants editor here. I've added in what I need to add in, adjusted what I need to adjust, added in our fill planes and particle animations. So I'm going to go ahead and save this now, and then we'll get into game and hopefully we'll have all of our parts showing up correctly and we'll be able to harvest what we need to harvest and all the rest of it. One thing I will just show you additionally is what I have in my actual mods folder here. Just very basic what comes with the map itself. I'm not sure if I mentioned already, but I have renamed the Manchester map itself the zip, because it does have an issue with this particular version. Because of the decimal point in 4.0, it will cause a conflict, and then for whatever reason the engine doesn't recognize that and it won't run. So I've just renamed that to Manchester_map so that it will actually run within FarmSim. I've added a couple of other bits and pieces, but the other parts that you will require are obviously the additional fruits scripts, and then I've also added in the 64 limit fix, because there is in the vanilla game a limit to the amount of fruit types that you can add into the map itself, or any particular map, and that limit is 64. I believe this particular fix increases that up to 128 additional fruit types. So I would highly recommend that you download that and install that into your mod folder as well. That will come from maru.net. If I remember to, I'll put a link into the description how to get that. But if you've played on any massively modified maps, you more than likely will already have this anyway. I know some maps do actually have a different script, which is the 128 vitamin script, I believe, built into the map, but I tend to always have this one in my mod folder anyway. That way it just prevents any additional issues that may occur of not being able to harvest or display any of those additional fruit types, as said. So that's just what I've got in there. So I'm going to just close that down, and what I'm going to do now is just save this Giants Editor session, and I'll put it into my mod folder, and we'll get into game, and then hopefully we'll be harvesting some sunflowers. So I'll see you shortly. So here we are now in game, and I've bought a few items just so we can actually test all this out. Just, you know, harvester, a couple of tractors and some bits and pieces there. So you can see obviously it is showing up in game correctly, the sunflower textures, and it's all doing its thing as it's meant to do, so that's a good start. So I'm just going to jump into the harvester here and we'll get it switched on, and hopefully, there we go, we are now harvesting sunflowers. As you can see in the bottom right hand corner there, it shows up as sunflowers. I have a text mod in, so it does show up text as well as the actual picture in the HUD, but it is showing up correctly, so far so good. And we can have a look in our harvester here, and you can see by adding in those particle animations and fill planes, we do actually have the correct particle animation there coming out of the spout. We have our fill planes showing up as sunflowers, so all is good. Okay, I think we've got enough there to test this out, so just going to open that up, put the pipe out, go and jump into our... Actually, did that come all the way out? No. I haven't got drive control installed, so I have to wait for the pipe to come all the way out. So we'll just grab our tractor here, and we'll just test this out, and we'll be able to see the actual fill plane and particle animation a little bit better here. So as you can see, we have got actually sunflowers in our trailer, and the particle animation is showing up correctly from the pipes, so that's all good. So we'll just get these few sunflowers into the trailer here. We'll go over and have a look at the actual triggers. What I'll try and do is tip some into the actual storage trigger, and then I'll go down to the cell trigger and we can tip some in there as well. Okay, so that's now done. So we'll go over to the storage trigger and we'll test that out, make sure that works. So here we are at our tip trigger for storage, and there we go, perfect. Particle animations all showing up, fantastic. Have a look in the in-game menu here. We can see that we actually have sunflowers all showing up correctly, HUD showing up correctly, and all the rest of the bits and pieces. And we actually got the price multiplier I showed you in Giants Editor somewhere around about right, I think. Matches in with most of the others. Again, you know, you need to play around with that and just see what is comfortable for you. Because I mean, I'm playing this on easy mode, and you can see there's soybeans at 4,000. but I think, you know, it does match in somewhat with some of the others, so I think that that's a pretty good price multiplier there. Again, you know, for whatever you decide to do with the game, you may wish to change that to give you a better return, as it is an additional fruit type. Entirely up to you, but it does work. So what I'll do now is I'm just going to collect a few more sunflowers and I'll meet you over at the cell trigger, so I'll see you in a little bit. So here we are now, coming around to our cell trigger here at the co-op, and we have our trigger come up, so that's good. And there we go, tipping sunflowers. And as you can see there, we've got £13,885 for those sunflowers, so I think that's all set up pretty good. Again, you will have to play around with that price multiplier to whatever works for you best. So what I'm going to do now is just switch over to my tractor here with the cultivator, because what I want to do here is just show you that it is possible to actually seed the sunflowers, and that they will actually come up in their appropriate growth stages. But obviously, because it requires the corn seeder to actually plant them down, cultivation or ploughing is required first before we can do that. So I'm just going to do a strip here of cultivation on the field. There we go, that's more enough. And I'll switch over to the, oops, went past it. Switch over to the seeder here, and we'll fill up with some seeds. And I will show you that just by pressing the O key here, I can cycle through and get to sunflowers. So all is good, all is showing up as intended. So we'll just stop that there, that's more than enough. And we'll get into field and put these down. Just wanted to show you that it does actually all work with the different parts of machinery, not just the harvester and whatever else. Can actually fill up with seeds, and this is all in-game equipment. I'm using no mods whatsoever when it comes to the machinery itself. So we'll just get this unfolded, get it lowered and turned on, and as you can see, it is actually seeding sunflowers. So fantastic. So I'll just do a small strip here, that'll be fine. And then what I want to show you here is the actual growth cycle and the way that they do show up. Now I have soil mod in, so it'll be a bit weird, but should show up okay. So I'm just going to fast forward time. I have the fast forward mod installed, so I'm just going to fast forward through a day. Let soil mod run its course. Get round to some daylight here. And we should have a growth cycle. And there we go. Soil mod is almost finished calculating, but more importantly we do actually have our growth cycle all shown up. So I'm just going to fast forward time again once soil mod is finished, and we can get round to the second growth cycle, just so I can show you that it does actually all come up and work as intended. So bear with me. So again, we'll get round to some daylight here, and we'll just wait for that cycle to come up. Okay, so now we're into the second growth cycle, so you can clearly see that has come up. Now obviously I'm not putting anything on the field, so you can see that the actual soil mod is being affected by the growth of the sunflowers, so there's no issues there. If you do tend to use or intend to use soil mod, it will work perfectly fine with this. So just go again until we get to our next growth cycle. We'll continue going until we get to the actual cycle that we were harvesting earlier on. So just bear with me again. We'll just again come round to some daylight here, and we'll wait for the next cycle to come up. Okay, again, there we are. Looking good, I think. You know, everything is there working as intended. So one more cycle and then we'll end this, I think, because we'll be at completion. I'm pretty sure this is more than likely going to be withered over here by now, but just have a quick look. Yeah, absolutely withered. So you can see all of the stages there are working. We'll just, well, I don't need to actually do another one. You've already seen that one there. So all growth stages showing up as intended there. So that's all working perfectly fine. So yeah, everything is actually doing exactly what I intended it to do, what I wanted it to do. So very good. Hope this helps out anybody who wishes to have a bit of a play around with importing a different or adding in additional fruit types into Manchester, in this particular case specifically Manchester. So any changes you do make to your map i3D with the growth foliage shaders and things like that, if you happen to be playing on a different map than this one, then obviously there will be some differences there, so you just need to be aware of that. And hopefully I've shown you that how to do that and how to search for those appropriate parts to make changes accordingly to get it to work with the map that you're playing with. As I say, we'll be doing another couple of videos adding in alfalfa and clover, otherwise known as lucerne and clee, into this particular map, so stay tuned for those. Yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you on the next one.